Did knights really die for love? Was their honor truly worth every sacrifice? From the twilight of the 11th century to the dawn of the 15th, countless tales spun through the grand halls and humble villages of Europe, whispers of devotion and despair echoing through the ages. What if the most beautiful promises led to the most heartbreaking ends? Number 10. The Vow of the Gilded Cage. Sir Kaelen, young and barely past his squire's years, stood before Princess Lyra in the sun-drenched courtyard of Castle Eldoria. His armor gleamed fresh and untarnished, much like the promise he was about to make. Princess Lyra, a vision in silks the color of spring meadows, had hair like spun moonlight and eyes the deep blue of the clearest lake. She was not yet 16, and her laughter, often heard echoing through the castle corridors, was like the chime of silver bells. Kaelen had served her father, King Theron, with an unwavering loyalty since he was a boy, and now, with whispers of political unrest stirring in the neighboring duchy of Valois, the king sought to solidify the future of his only child. King had declared that Princess Lyra, despite her young age, must soon be wed to a powerful duke to secure an alliance. Lyra, however, harbored a quiet rebellion in her heart, a longing for a life beyond a political pawn. She had confided in Kaelen, her trusted guard, about her fears, her dreams of freedom, her desire for a true companion, not a political partner. On this fateful morning, King Theron, with a stern gaze and a voice that brooked no argument, summoned Kaelen. Your life, your very being, will be devoted to her safety and the fulfillment of her destiny as the Duchess of Valois. You are to ensure she reaches her new home and her new life, untouched and unharmed, her spirit unbroken for the duties ahead. Are you willing to make this vow? Kaelen looked at Lyra, standing beside her father, her eyes wide and pleading, a silent request for understanding. He knew what the king truly meant. Guard her, yes, but also guard her from herself, from her own rebellious spirit, from any affection that might bloom outside the king's plans. It was a vow that would bind him not just to protection, but to a subtle form of imprisonment. A gilded cage, not for Lyra alone, but for his own heart, which had already begun to beat a different rhythm in the princess's presence. He saw the flicker of despair in her eyes, a reflection of his own dawning sorrow. With a heavy heart, knowing the cost, Kaelen knelt, his voice steady despite the tremor in his soul. I, Sir Kaelen of Eldoria, swear upon my sword and my honor to protect Princess Lyra, to guard her well-being, and to ensure her path to her destined future, come what may. The words hung in the air, a beautiful, terrible promise. The days that followed were a blur of preparation. The royal procession, a grand cavalcade of knights, ladies-in-waiting, and laden carts, began its long journey to the Duchy of Valois. Kaelen rode at Lyra's side, his eyes constantly scanning the road, his hand never far from his sword hilt. He was a silent sentinel, a stoic shadow. Yet, in the quiet evenings, by the flickering firelight, as Lyra would speak of her dreams of a simple life away from the intricate dance of court politics, Kaelen would listen, his heart aching with an unspoken understanding. He was bound by his vow to lead her towards a fate she did not desire, a fate he now knew she dreaded, could not offer solace beyond his silent presence, for to do so would be to betray his solemn oath to the king. He saw the laughter slowly fade from her eyes, replaced by a quiet resignation, a melancholic gaze that often met his own, a silent acknowledgement of their shared plight. Bandits plagued their journey, and Kaelen fought with a ferocity that surprised even himself, his every strike fueled by the single-minded purpose of his vow. He was wounded once, an arrow grazing his arm, but he barely noticed the pain, his focus solely on Lyra's safety. She tended to his wound, her fingers gentle, her touch sending a jolt through him, a reminder of the barrier between them. He felt a deep tenderness towards her, a love that swelled like a tide, but his vow was an unyielding wall. He was her protector, her guardian, but never her equal in affection. He was merely the keeper of her gilded cage, a cage he himself was also trapped within. As they neared the ducal lands, the celebrations for the impending marriage began. Duke Armand, a man twice Lyra's age, with a stern countenance and eyes that held no warmth, greeted them with formal courtesy. He was a man of power and influence, exactly what King Theron desired, but he was devoid of the kindness Lyra craved. Lyra's spirit, once vibrant, seemed to dim further with each passing day. Kaelen observed her from a distance, a silent witness to her quiet despair. He saw her trying to smile, to engage, but her eyes held a profound sadness. He heard her sigh, a sound that pierced his heart as she spoke of her future with the Duke, a future built on duty and devoid of passion. He felt the weight of his vow pressing down on him, a heavy chain around his soul. He had protected her body, her status, but he had failed to protect her spirit, though his vow had implicitly demanded that failure. The wedding ceremony was a lavish affair, filled with music and feasting, but to Kaelen it felt like a funeral. He stood guard, his gaze fixed on Lyra, beautiful in her wedding gown, yet looking as if a part of her had died. She walked down the aisle, her steps slow, her hand extended to the Duke, a gesture of surrender. As she passed him, her eyes, once so full of life, met his. In that brief, fleeting moment, Kaelen saw a silent plea, a profound sorrow, and a resignation that broke his heart into 1,000 pieces. He stood there, unmoving. As the vows were exchanged, as Lyra became Duchess Armand, his vow had been fulfilled. She was safe. She was married. Her future secured for the kingdom. Yet, the cost was immeasurable. Kaelen remained in Valois, part of Lyra's personal guard, a permanent fixture in her new, grand yet lonely life. He saw her rarely, always in formal settings, always with the Duke present. He watched as her laughter faded entirely, replaced by a quiet, polite demeanor. He saw her age, the spark gone from her eyes, her beauty matured into a somber elegance. He kept his distance, his vow a constant reminder of his purpose, of his inability to be anything more. He was her shadow, and shadows, by their nature, cannot touch the light. He had protected her, as he vowed, and in doing so he had become the silent, ever-present guardian of her gilded cage, forever watching her from the outside, forever imprisoned by the very oath he had made. The years turned into a silent torment, a life lived in proximity to the one he loved, yet separated by an unbridgeable chasm of duty and unspoken yearning. His vow of protection had become a vow of eternal, unrequited sacrifice. Number 9. The Vow of the Amber Locket. Sir Gareth, a knight whose name was whispered with respect across the borderlands of the Kingdom of Eldoria, stood on the windswept ramparts of Castle Stonehaven. His gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, where the first hint of the eastern sun painted the sky in fiery hues. Beside him stood Lady Rowena, her slender hand gripping his arm, her eyes the color of a summer sky clouded with a mixture of fear and devotion. A royal summons had arrived, an urgent call to arms from King Theron. Treacherous Lord Mortain, from the northern marches, had declared war, his forces already laying siege to the strategic stronghold of Redcliffe. Gareth, known for his prowess with the sword and his unwavering courage, was among the first called to lead the Eldorian vanguard. Their love story was a quiet one, built on shared laughter in sunlit gardens and whispered confidences beneath starlit skies. Rowena was the daughter of the local baron, a woman of gentle spirit but fierce loyalty. They had planned to wed by the coming autumn, a future stretching before them, seemingly bright and unblemished. But war, as it often does, had cast its long shadow. Gareth had already donned his war-worn armor, the weight of the steel a grim reminder of the journey ahead. He adjusted his gauntlet, his hand brushing against the small, intricately carved amber locket that hung from a silver chain around his neck. Rowena had given it to him just moments before, a piece of her own hair, braided finely, sealed within the warm, transparent stone. "Gareth," Rowena whispered, her voice barely audible above the howling wind, "you must promise me something, a sacred vow." Her eyes pleaded with him, shimmering with unshed tears. "Promise me you will wear this locket always, through the thick of battle, through the longest nights, through every trial. Let it be a reminder of our love, of our future, of my hope for your safe return. Swear to me, Gareth, that you will never take it off, not until you are back in my arms." Gareth looked into her eyes, seeing the depth of her love, the fear that gnawed at her heart. He knew the dangers of war, the brutal realities of the battlefield, but he also knew the power of a promise, a knight's word, as unbreakable as the strongest steel. He reached up, his calloused fingers gently touching the locket, its warmth a comfort against his skin. "I will wear it through battle, through sickness, through any trial, until I return to you, my love, and place it back in your hands." He sealed the vow with a tender kiss, a promise etched not just in words, but in the deepest chambers of his heart. The farewell was brief, a wrenching pull as Gareth rode away, the clatter of his horse's hooves fading into the morning mists. He was a knight among many, but his vow was his own, a secret strength carried close to his heart. The war was brutal, a relentless clash of steel and will. Gareth fought with a ferocity born of his promise, an almost reckless courage that stemmed from the amber warmth against his chest. He led charges, defended flanks, and endured sieges. He saw countless horrors, the grim reality of death, the suffering of comrades. He witnessed acts of unimaginable bravery and chilling cruelty. Through it all, the amber locket remained a constant weight, a silent reminder of Rowena, of home, of the future he vowed to return to. Once, during a desperate siege of Redcliffe, a stray arrow loosed from a northern archer struck him squarely in the chest. His armor, though strong, splintered, and the impact sent him reeling. His men, thinking him gravely wounded, rushed to his aid. As they tended to him, cutting away a section of his breastplate to assess the damage, they discovered the locket lodged firmly against his skin, having absorbed the blunt force of the arrow, saving him from a grievous wound. "It was a miracle," they whispered, "a sign of divine protection." Gareth, pale and shaken, could only touch the warm amber, a silent testament to Rowena's love, a tangible piece of her promise protecting him. The locket had taken the blow, cracked but not shattered, its delicate chain still unbroken. He simply resecured it, a quiet strength rekindled within him. The war dragged on for 3 long years. 3 brutal years of campaigning across harsh lands, of bitter winters and scorched summers. News from home was scarce and often grim. Gareth, now a seasoned commander, bore the scars of countless battles, both on his body and in his soul. The once bright hope in his eyes had been tempered by the harsh realities of war, replaced by a quiet weariness. His hair was streaked with gray, his face lined with the burdens of leadership and loss. But the locket remained, a steadfast companion, a piece of Rowena's hope clinging to him. He often found himself touching it, a small reassuring gesture in the chaos of war, a silent conversation with the one he had left behind. Finally, after a decisive victory at the Battle of the Whispering Woods, Lord Morton's forces were routed, and Eldoria claimed victory. The weary knights began their long journey home, a parade of triumph mixed with profound sorrow for the fallen. Gareth, at the head of his contingent, felt a surge of relief mixed with a dread he could not name. He had fulfilled his military duty, his vow to the king, Now only his personal vow to Rowena remained. As they neared Castle Stonehaven, a strange quiet descended upon him. He saw the familiar banner, the towering walls, but a sense of unease settled in his heart. He dismounted in the courtyard, his men cheering, but his eyes searched for one face, one familiar smile. He saw his father, the Baron, his face etched with age, his mother, her eyes glistening with tears. But Rowena was not there. His father approached him, his voice heavy with sorrow. A sickness swept through the village 2 years past, a cruel fever. She succumbed to it, Gareth holding on to the hope of your return until her last breath. She spoke of you constantly, of your vow of the locket. Gareth stood there, unmoving, the words echoing in the vast courtyard. Cheers of his men, the sounds of celebration faded into a distant hum. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. He had worn the locket. He had kept his vow. He had returned, but not to her. The amber locket, still warm against his chest, felt like a burning ember, a symbol of both his enduring love and his profound, unyielding grief. He had kept his promise, but the one to whom it was made was no longer there to receive him. The locket, meant to be a symbol of reunion, had become a perpetual monument to enduring love and eternal, heart-wrenching loss. He had returned, victorious, but his personal victory was a hollow, desolate echo. The vow had been fulfilled, but the cost was an empty future. Number 8. The Vow of the Phantom Steed. Sir Arion of the Northern Reach, a knight whose valor on the battlefield was matched only by the depth of his devotion, rode into the moonlit clearing, his heart heavy with a grief that threatened to consume him. Behind him, the sounds of a terrible skirmish faded into the night. His armor was scarred, his sword still stained, but he was alive, a survival that felt like a curse. His beloved Lady Seraphina lay still beneath a towering oak, her silken gown stained with the crimson of her sacrifice. Just moments before, an ambush, swift and brutal, had erupted from the dense woods. Arion, caught off guard, had been dismounted, his life threatened by a dozen swords. Seraphina, who had insisted on accompanying him on this diplomatic mission, had not hesitated. With a shriek that tore through the night, she had thrown herself between Arion and a fatal blow, taking the blade meant for him. Arion knelt beside her, his gauntleted hand trembling as he touched her cold cheek. Her eyes, once bright with laughter and warmth, were now fixed on the distant stars. A single profound thought pierced through his grief. She had died for him. Her final act was one of ultimate protection, a testament to a love so fierce it defied the very instinct of self-preservation. He remembered her vibrant spirit, her love for horses, particularly her magnificent white mare, Lyra, a creature of almost mythical grace and speed. Seraphina had often ridden Lyra. Her laughter carried on the wind a vision of pure joy. Now, both were gone. Lyra had been taken by the ambushers, spirited away in the chaos. With the chill night air biting at his skin and the weight of her sacrifice pressing on his soul, Arion lifted his gaze to the moon. A silent vow, born of profound sorrow and unshakable loyalty, formed on his lips. Let all who face me in battle know that they face not just a knight, but the undying spirit of a love that defied death. The vow, made in the desolate clearing, was a promise to the departed, a covenant with a ghost. Arion returned to his keep, a changed man. The vibrant knight was gone, replaced by a somber, silent figure. His white mare, Lyra, was never recovered, and true to his vow, Arion refused to take another war horse. When the trumpets called him to arms, when the banners were unfurled for conflict, Arion would walk. He would march with his men, his armor heavy, his sword ready, but no steed carried him. His commanders questioned him. His fellow knights urged him to practicality. "A knight without a warhorse is half a knight, Sir Arion," they would exclaim. But Arion would simply shake his head, his eyes holding a distant sorrow. "My steed rides unseen," he would say, his voice a low murmur. In the ensuing battles, a strange legend began to form around Sir Arion. He fought with an almost supernatural agility, appearing suddenly where needed, his movements fluid and swift as if carried by an unseen force. Enemy soldiers swore they saw a shimmering, spectral white mare galloping beside him in the thick of the fray, its hooves making no sound, its form indistinct yet undeniably present. Arrows that should have found their mark seemed to glance off him or simply miss, as if he moved faster than the eye could follow. He was described as a blur of motion, a knight possessed by a silent fury. The legend of the phantom steed knight grew, spreading through the ranks of both allies and foes. Soldiers whispered of the white horse that accompanied him, a ghost of the battlefield, a harbinger of doom for his enemies. Arion himself felt it, the presence of Seraphina. In the roar of battle, he felt a subtle shift, a guiding hand, a whisper of encouragement. He fought not just with skill, but with the strength of a love that transcended the veil of death. He was relentless, fearless, for what more could death take from him? He was already walking with a phantom. He never spoke of these sensations, keeping them sacred, a private communion with the one who had given everything for him. He endured the hardships of war, the brutal winters, the arduous campaigns, never faltering, never taking the new mount. His vow held him to a path of unwavering, tragic loyalty. As the years passed, Sir Arion became a living legend, a figure of awe and melancholy. His hair turned white, his face deeply furrowed by the passage of time and the weight of his singular vow. He still walked into battle, his armor now bearing the marks of 100 conflicts, his steps unyielding. The stories of the phantom steed continued to be told around campfires, tales of a ghostly mare leading him through the most perilous skirmishes, ensuring his miraculous survival. Yet with each victory, with each tale of his uncanny prowess, Arion felt only a deeper sense of isolation. His vow, which had saved him, had also condemned him to a lonely existence, forever bound to a love that was present only in spirit. One bitter winter's day, during a skirmish against marauding bandits in a desolate valley, Arion, now an old man, fought with his usual unyielding determination. He was surrounded, his few remaining men overwhelmed. He stood his ground, his sword flashing, his movements still surprisingly agile for his age. As a final blow came rushing towards him, he closed his eyes, a serene smile gracing his lips. He felt a cool breeze, a familiar presence, and then a lightness. It was said that at that moment a shimmering white mare, more brilliant than starlight, appeared beside him, its ethereal form visible to those who witnessed his final stand. The mare bowed its head, and Arion, with a final, contented sigh, collapsed. He died in battle as a knight should, but not alone. The vow had been kept, not just in life, but beyond it. The phantom steed had carried him through the battles of his existence, and in the end, it carried him home. A final, poignant reunion for a love that had defied death. His vow had brought him through life, but only in death did it truly bring him peace. Number 7. The Vow of the Winter's Heart. Brother Elias, once known as Sir Gareth, stood cloaked in the simple woolen robes of the Cistercian order, the cold stone walls of the Abbey of St. Benedict chilling him to the bone. The scent of ancient parchment and beeswax filled the air, a stark contrast to the scent of wood smoke and wildflowers that had once defined his life. Years ago, Gareth had been a knight of renown, his lance swift, his heart true, but then a profound spiritual awakening had struck him after a particularly brutal campaign, a deep weariness with the bloodshed and the ephemeral glories of the world. He had sought solace and redemption in the contemplative life, making a solemn vow before the High Abbot, a vow of perpetual celibacy, of poverty, and of unwavering obedience to God. He would dedicate his life to prayer and scholarly pursuits, his past laid to rest, his heart purged of worldly desires. He had believed truly that his heart had become a winter's heart, cold to earthly passions. His monastic life was one of rigid discipline and quiet contemplation. He spent his days transcribing ancient texts in the scriptorium, his nights in prayer in the chill chapel. His mind, once occupied with battle tactics and courtly intrigues, was now filled with theological debates and spiritual meditations. He found a certain peace in the routine, a solace in the silence. He had truly believed his heart had been sealed against human affection, transformed by his sacred vows into something purer, more divine. Then the plague, a dark, insidious shadow, swept through the nearby village. The abbey, being a center of learning and healing, opened its gates to the afflicted. Among the many who sought refuge and aid was a woman named Lyra, a village healer, known for her gentle touch and eyes that held the wisdom of the ancient forests. She had brought her ailing younger brother to the abbey, seeking the monks' knowledge and the sanctity of their blessed grounds. Lyra was not beautiful in the conventional courtly sense, but her spirit shone with an inner light, her compassion boundless, her quiet strength unwavering. Aelius, assigned to assist in the infirmary, due to his robust constitution and surprising gentleness, found himself working alongside Lyra. He saw her tireless dedication, her empathy for the suffering, her calm in the face of despair. She moved with a quiet grace, her hands skilled, her voice soft and reassuring. As days turned into weeks and the plague slowly receded, a connection subtle yet profound began to form between them. They spoke little, their conversations limited to medical matters and practicalities, yet their eyes met often, a silent understanding passing between them. Elias, who had vowed his heart to God, felt an unfamiliar warmth stir within his chest, a thaw in his winter's heart. He recognized it, with a jolt of fear and a surge of profound tenderness. He was falling in love. This forbidden love, a silent rebellion against his sacred vow, tortured Elias. He who had sought spiritual purity now found himself consumed by a longing for a woman, a yearning that was utterly human, deeply earthly. He saw Lyra's quiet dignity, her gentle smile, and his vowed celibacy felt like a cruel, insurmountable barrier. He could not speak of his feelings, could not even hint at them, for to do so would be to break his vow, to betray his order, and to dishonor the God he had pledged his life to. He carried the burden of this unspoken love in silence, a constant ache beneath his ribs. He watched her leave the abbey. Once the plague had passed, her brother recovered, her duty done. Lyra simply thanked him, her eyes soft, a lingering gaze that mirrored his own unvoiced sorrow. He wished with every fiber of his being to call out to her to confess the tempest in his soul, but the words remained trapped behind his lips, choked by the weight of his vows. He watched her walk away, a figure disappearing into the distance, taking with her the last vestiges of warmth that had touched his hardened heart. Elias returned to his monastic duties, but the silence of the abbey now felt like a torment. The Latin chants, once a source of comfort, now seemed to mock his inner turmoil. He tried to focus on his scriptures, on his prayers, but Lyra's face, her gentle hands, her compassionate eyes haunted his every thought. He became thinner, paler, his sleep disturbed by dreams of a life he could not have. His fellow monks noticed his change, attributing it to the lingering effects of the plague, or perhaps a deeper spiritual struggle. They offered him solace, unaware of the true nature of his affliction. His vow, meant to bring him closer to the divine, had instead brought him closer to a profound human suffering. He was a prisoner of his own sacred promise, a man whose heart, once cold and withdrawn, had been reawakened only to be eternally denied. He had sought to escape the world, but the world in the form of a gentle healer had found its way back into his soul, leaving him in a perpetual state of longing. Years passed, and Elias grew old within the abbey walls. His hands, once strong enough to wield a sword, became frail. His sight dimmed from endless hours of transcription. He never saw Lyra again. He heard whispers of her continued work in the village, of her quiet life. Each mention of her name was a fresh stab to his heart, a reminder of the love he had sacrificed for a vow he could not break. His winter's heart remained cold to the touch of the world, yet forever burning with the embers of a forbidden love. He died in the Abbey of Saint Benedict, a devout monk to the very end, his lips uttering the final prayers. But in his final moments, as the breath left his body, it was said that a single, almost imperceptible tear escaped his closed eyes, a silent testament to the enduring, heartbreaking weight of the love he had locked away for a lifetime, a love kept captive by his unbreakable sacred vow. Number 6. The Vow of the Sunken Chalice. Queen Isolde, a woman of ethereal beauty and profound grace, lay pale and still in her bedchamber, her breath shallow, her strength ebbing with each passing day. A mysterious illness, swift and merciless, had stolen the vitality from her, leaving her physicians baffled and the kingdom of Lyonesse gripped by fear. Her husband, King Theron, a man of formidable presence, paced his chambers, his brow furrowed with despair. Among his most trusted knights was Sir Tristan, a warrior of legendary skill and a quiet devotion to his queen. Tristan had always served Isolde with a loyalty that went beyond mere duty, a profound respect for her wisdom and compassion. He felt her suffering as if it were his own, the light dimming in the kingdom mirroring the fading light in her eyes. One evening, a desperate whisper spread through the court. An ancient hermit revered for his wisdom and connection to the forgotten lore of the land had spoken of a legend, a long-lost relic. It was the Chalice of Eldrin, a sacred goblet said to hold the very essence of life, capable of curing any illness, of restoring even the brink of death. But the chalice was not easily found. Legend claimed it lay at the bottom of the Serpent's Mire, a desolate, mist-shrouded lake, known for its treacherous currents and the eerie tales of ancient spirits that guarded its depths. Many had sought it over the centuries. None had ever returned. Tristan, his heart a raw wound, heard the hermit's words. He went to King Theron, his voice firm, his resolve absolute. "I swear by my very soul that I will not return to Lyonesse without the Chalice of Eldrin, or I will not return at all. I will bring salvation to our queen, or I will join her in the quiet lands beyond." King Theron, seeing the fierce determination in Tristan's eyes, and with no other hope remaining, granted his permission. Tristan, without hesitation, prepared for his perilous journey, took only his trusty sword, a stout rope, and a few days' provisions. His farewell to Isolde was silent, a long, lingering gaze that spoke volumes of his despair and his unwavering love. He set off under the cloak of night, his heart filled with a terrible hope. The journey to the Serpent's Mire was arduous, the paths were overgrown, the forests dark and foreboding. He encountered strange, unsettling creatures, and felt the watchful eyes of unseen beings upon him. But his resolve did not waver. The image of Isolde, frail and fading, fueled his every step. Finally, after days of relentless travel, he arrived at the mire. It was a place of chilling beauty, its dark waters still and reflective, shrouded in a perpetual swirling mist. The air hung heavy with an ancient silent power. Tristan secured his rope to a gnarled ancient tree at the water's edge and began his descent into the murky depths. The water was frigid, seizing his breath, and the darkness was absolute. He swam deeper, the pressure increasing with every fathom. Strange glowing shapes drifted past him in the inky blackness, Whispers seemed to echo in his ears, voices that promised eternal rest if he would only surrender. He felt cold, spectral hands brush against his skin, attempting to pull him deeper, to entangle him in unseen weeds. Tristan pushed on, his mind focused solely on the chalice, on Isolde. His vow was a burning ember in the crushing darkness, a guiding light in the abyss. Hours passed, stretching into an eternity. His lungs ached, his muscles screamed from the exertion, and the chill seeped into his very bones. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm him, his hand brushed against something smooth and metallic. He grasped it, his fingers closing around a cool, intricate form. It was the chalice, glowing with a soft, ethereal light, illuminating the ancient symbols carved into its surface. It hummed with a subtle energy, a silent promise of life. With a surge of renewed strength, Tristan began his slow, arduous ascent. The spectral hands seemed to push him down now. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, trying to prevent the chalice from leaving their domain. He fought against the unseen forces, his body screaming in protest, but he clung to the goblet, his vow echoing in his mind. He finally broke the surface, gasping for air, the chalice held aloft, its light cutting through the oppressive mist. He collapsed on the muddy bank, shivering uncontrollably, but the chalice, vibrant and pulsating, was in his possession. He had fulfilled the first part of his vow. The journey back was equally perilous. Exhausted, weak, and haunted by the entities of the mire, Tristan stumbled through the forests. He was beset by fever, his body racked with chills and tremors, a consequence of his venture into the cursed waters. He barely ate, barely slept, driven solely by the knowledge that Isolde's life hung in the balance. He clutched the chalice, its warm glow a constant reminder of his purpose. He knew he was dying, but his vow meant he could not stop, not until he brought the chalice to her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he staggered into the gates of Lyonesse. He was a shadow of his former self, gaunt and haggard, his armor covered in mud and grime, his eyes sunken. He was barely recognized by the guards who rushed to his aid. He was immediately brought to the Queen's chamber, the chalice still clutched in his hand. King Theron, alerted to his return, hurried to his side, his face a mixture of relief and horror at Tristan's state. With his last ounce of strength, Tristan reached for Isolde, his fingers trembling as he placed the chalice in her pale, weak hand. A faint smile touched her lips, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. As her fingers closed around the chalice, a soft, golden light enveloped her. Her breathing steadied, her color slowly returned, and a warmth spread through her frail body. The chalice worked its magic, restoring her life, fulfilling the promise of the legend. Isolde, with a soft sigh, opened her eyes, her gaze clear and strong. Her life returned. But as Isolde sat up, miraculously restored, Tristan collapsed, the light fading from his own eyes. The fever, the exhaustion, the battle with the unseen forces of the mire, it had taken its toll. He had brought life to his queen, but he had given his own in the process. His vow had been to return with the chalice, or not at all. He had done both. He had fulfilled his solemn promise, but the price was his own life, a final, tragic sacrifice. Isolde, fully recovered, reached for him, her hand touching his face just as his spirit departed. Chalice of Eldrin had saved her, but in doing so it had taken the life of the one who had dared to retrieve it, a testament to a desperate hope and a devastating singular vow. Number 5. The Vow of the Crimson Banner. Lord Kaelen, a fearsome warlord whose name struck terror into the hearts of his enemies, stood upon the scorched earth of the defeated kingdom of Veridia. Smoke still plumed from the distant ruins of its capital, and the triumphant shouts of his victorious army echoed across the ravaged landscape. But Kaelen's heart felt no joy in this conquest. His gaze was fixed not on the fallen banners of Veridia, but on a figure brought before him, a young woman bound in chains, her exquisite garments torn, her spirit defiant. She was Queen Lyra of Veridia, a monarch renowned for her beauty and her unwavering courage. She had led her people with fierce determination, fighting until the very last. But ultimately her kingdom had fallen to Kaelen's relentless might. Kaelen had heard tales of Queen Lyra's beauty, but facing her now, battered and defiant, he found himself unexpectedly captivated. Her eyes, filled with a fiery pride, met his own with a challenge that stirred something deep within him. He saw not just a captive queen, but a spirit unbroken, a strength that mirrored his own. He was a conqueror, a man who took what he desired, but as he looked at Lyra, a different kind of desire, one he had never known, began to blossom in his ruthless heart. He wished to possess not just her kingdom, but her very heart, her loyalty, her love. In a voice that silenced the surrounding jubilant soldiers, Kaelen made an unexpected declaration. "I will raise my crimson banner over Aurelia, and only then will I ask for your hand. This is my vow, and it will be fulfilled." The vow hung heavy in the air, a shocking declaration from a ruthless warlord. His men, accustomed to plunder and immediate gratification, were stunned. Lyra, bound and weary, stared at him, her defiance slowly softening into a puzzled disbelief. To conquer Aurelia, a vast and powerful kingdom, was a monumental task, one that would require years of brutal warfare. But Kaelen, driven by this newfound obsession, was resolute. He ordered Lyra to be taken to his strongest fortress, treated not as a prisoner but as a guest, albeit a captive one, her every need attended to, but her freedom denied until his vow was fulfilled. For the next 5 years, Kaelen waged a relentless war against Aurelia. His crimson banner, once a symbol of terror, became a beacon of his unyielding determination. He fought with a ferocity fueled by his vow, conquering city after city, enduring countless battles, pushing his armies through harsh winters and scorching summers. He suffered wounds, lost trusted commanders, but he never wavered. The image of Lyra, her defiant eyes and proud spirit, haunted his dreams and drove him forward. He sent messengers to her regularly, reporting his progress, never asking for a reply, simply offering updates on his relentless campaign. He believed that by conquering Aurelia, by fulfilling his vow, he would prove his worth, earn her respect, and finally win her love. The war against Aurelia was a crucible that transformed Kaelen. The brutal realities of prolonged conflict, the endless bloodshed, the sacrifices demanded of his men, it began to chip away at the edges of his ruthless ambition. He saw the suffering, the destruction, the irreversible changes wrought by war. He achieved his goal finally. The magnificent capital of Aurelia lay at his feet, its proud banner replaced by his own crimson standard. The vow was fulfilled. He had conquered Aurelia, and now he prepared to return to Lyra, to claim his prize, to lay the crown at her feet. He rode back to his fortress, anticipating a reunion, a moment of triumph. But as he entered the grand hall where Lyra awaited, he stopped, his heart suddenly cold. She stood before him, still strikingly beautiful, but changed. The fiery defiance in her eyes was gone, replaced by a profound weariness, a deep, abiding sadness. Her face was no longer sharp with youthful pride, but softened by sorrow, etched with the passage of years spent in captivity, watching her people suffer through Kaelen's relentless campaigns against their rival. He approached her, a golden crown, taken from Aurelia's vaults, in his hand. Lyra, he began, his voice surprisingly gentle. I have fulfilled my vow. I have conquered Aurelia. I lay its crown at your feet. Now I ask for your hand. Be my queen, not of a ruined kingdom, but of a new empire, united under my rule for you. Lyra looked at the crown, then at Kaelen, her eyes devoid of hatred, but also devoid of any warmth. You have fulfilled your vow, Lord Kaelen, she said, her voice quiet, yet resonant with an unspoken pain. The Alara you sought to win, the one filled with fire and defiance, ceased to exist many years ago, buried beneath the weight of your conquests. You have won a kingdom, but you have lost the heart you wished to claim. This crown you offer, it is stained with the tears of my people and the blood of countless lives. It is a crown of sorrow, not of joy. She took the crown, a heavy, silent symbol of his violent love, and placed it on the pedestal beside her. She looked at him, her gaze meeting his, a silent acknowledgement of the vast chasm between them. I will be your queen, Lord Kaelen, she said, her voice resigned, as you have sworn, but do not mistake this for love. It is a surrender, a consequence of your relentless vow. You have built an empire, yes, but you have shattered the very thing you wish to possess. Kaelen stood there, the weight of her words heavier than any armor. He had won the war, fulfilled his vow, built an empire, but he had lost the one prize he had truly come to covet, her heart. He had brought her a new kingdom, but he had taken her joy, her spirit. Crimson banner, once a symbol of his triumphant, brutal love, now flew over an empire built on a hollow victory, a testament to a vow fulfilled at the cost of the very love it was meant to win. His kingdom was vast, his power immense, but his heart, the heart of the conqueror, remained empty, forever haunted by the silent sorrow of his queen, a poignant reminder of a vow that brought conquest, but no true union. Number 4. The Vow of the Unending Vigil. In the shadowed halls of Castle Draken, a place once alive with the laughter of children and the bustling energy of court, a profound silence had fallen. Sir Alaric, a knight whose loyalty to his liege Baron Cedric was legendary, moved through the castle like a ghost, his face a mask of profound grief. Not a month prior, Lady Eleanora, Baron Cedric's beloved wife and the gentle heart of the castle, had been found murdered in her private chambers, a brutal crime that had sent shockwaves of horror through the land. No one knew who had committed the deed. No clues remained, only the chilling emptiness she left behind. The Baron, consumed by sorrow and rage, had vowed to find her killer, but the trail had gone cold, and despair had begun to settle over the castle like a shroud. Alaric, who had served Lady Eleanora with an unspoken devotion, admired her kindness, her wisdom, her serene presence that had brought light to the often stern atmosphere of the Baron's court. He remembered her gentle smile, her soft words of encouragement, her compassion for the less fortunate. He felt the injustice of her death like a physical wound. One moonless night, unable to sleep, unable to bear the gnawing uncertainty, Alaric found himself in the castle's private chapel, standing before Eleanora's freshly sealed tomb. The air was thick with the scent of lilies and cold stone. He knelt, his gauntleted hand resting on the cool marble, his heart aching with an unyielding sorrow. I will not rest, I will not seek comfort, I will not engage in any earthly pleasure until your murderer is brought to justice and your soul can truly find peace. Let this be my penance for failing to protect you in life and my enduring tribute to your noble spirit. My vigil will be unending until justice is served. From that day forward, Sir Alaric kept his vow. He established a small cot within the chapel, beside Eleanora's tomb. He ate sparingly, slept only when exhaustion claimed him, and spent his waking hours in silent contemplation, his gaze fixed on the marble effigy of the lady he had so admired. He dismissed his squires, gave away his possessions save for his armor and sword which stood sentinel beside him. He did not speak, save for the occasional hushed prayer. The other knights, the servants, even Baron Cedric himself tried to dissuade him, to offer him comfort, to urge him to return to his duties. But Alaric would simply shake his head, his eyes, once bright with valor, now holding a distant, unwavering resolve. The castle soon adapted to his strange, silent presence. He became a living monument to grief and unwavering dedication. His once gleaming armor grew dull with disuse. His hair and beard grew long and unkempt, streaked with gray. His body, once robust, became gaunt, his features sharpened by relentless vigil. He was a shadow of his former self, a silent sentinel consumed by his vow. The whispers of the castle staff spoke of him with a mixture of reverence and pity, calling him the Vigil Knight. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and months into years. The seasons changed, the world outside moved on, but Alaric remained. He became a gaunt, ghostly figure, his presence a constant, chilling reminder of the unsolved crime. He never spoke of his theory, never pointed a finger, for his vow was to wait for the truth, not to seek it through active investigation. He believed that the truth, like a shadow, would eventually reveal itself in the light of his unwavering devotion. He simply waited, a living embodiment of unyielding sorrow and unwavering justice. Rumors and suspicions swirled through the kingdom, but no definitive proof ever emerged. The murderer of Lady Eleonora remained a mystery, lost to the passage of time. Baron Cedric, burdened by grief and the relentless pressure of his own duties, eventually succumbed to despair. His health failing from a broken heart, he died without ever finding. His vigil continued, his vow a living, breathing burden. The years passed, marked by the slow decay of his body, the fading of his strength. He was an old man now, frail and bent, but his eyes, though dim, still held that same unwavering resolve. He was a relic of a bygone tragedy, a knight consumed by a single unfulfilled promise. The once vibrant castle, now under the rule of a new baron, had grown accustomed to the silent, ever-present guardian in the chapel. Children grew up knowing of the old knight who always sat by the tomb. A somber story whispered in the halls. One cold winter morning, as the first rays of dawn pierced the chapel's stained glass windows, a young acolyte brought Alaric his meager meal. He found the old knight still, his head resting against the cool marble of the tomb, his eyes closed in a silent, peaceful sleep. He had finally succumbed. His long vigil ended not by the revelation of truth, but by the relentless passage of time. He had waited until his last breath. His vow kept, his loyalty unwavering. Lady Eleonora's killer remained unknown, her justice unserved. But Alaric, the Vigil Knight, had fulfilled his vow of unending watch, a testament to a love and loyalty so profound it defied life itself, transforming him into a living embodiment of sorrow and devotion. His life became the vigil, his death the quiet, unfulfilled end of a promise that could only conclude with his own final breath. Number 3. The Vow of the Shattered Lance. Sir Roland, a knight whose name was synonymous with chivalry and skill in the joust, stood on the grand tournament grounds, the cheers of the crowd a distant roar in his ears. His gaze was fixed on Lady Isolde, his betrothed, a woman of exquisite grace and fiery spirit, seated in the royal viewing stand. Her silken gown shimmered in the sunlight, and her smile, meant for him alone, filled him with a fierce joy. Roland was about to ride in the final tilt of the grand tournament, facing his bitter rival, the arrogant and notoriously cruel Baron Valerius. Valerius had long coveted Isolde, and his defeat in the earlier rounds had only deepened his resentment. As Roland prepared for the final charge, a sudden, shocking incident unfolded. Baron Valerius, in a grotesque display of malice, rode his horse close to the viewing stand where Isolde was seated. With a sneer, he produced a small, intricately carved wooden bird that Roland had given Isolde as a token of their love. With a swift, contemptuous gesture, Valerius shattered the bird beneath his horse's hooves, its delicate pieces scattering like dust. He then spat at Isolde's feet, his eyes burning with triumphant contempt. A gasp of horror rippled through the crowd. Isolde, her face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock and humiliation, recoiled, a single tear tracing a path down her pale cheek. Roland, witnessing this vile act, felt a surge of cold fury. The cheers of the crowd, the festive atmosphere of the tournament, vanished. All he saw was Isolde's violated honor, her silent tears, his heart constricted with a terrible pain. The insult was not just to Isolde, but to their love, to his knightly honor, to everything he held sacred. He knew then that no mere jousting victory, no simple apology, could ever atone for such a deliberate, public act of cruelty. He rode his magnificent warhorse to the center of the field, his hand gripping his lance, his knuckles white. The crowd, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, had fallen silent. Roland raised his lance, pointing it not at Valerius, but at the sky, a silent, terrible vow on his lips. Baron Valerius, he roared, his voice echoing across the hushed grounds, filled with a raw, unbridled fury. From this day forward, I will hunt you. I will pursue you across every land. I will deny you rest until I have utterly destroyed you, until your honor is shattered as you shattered my lady's peace. This lance, though it may shatter in the joust, will be but the first step. My vengeance will be complete, relentless, and absurd step. Such a vow made in public transcended the rules of the tournament. It was a declaration of relentless personal vendetta. Tournament officials, shocked, tried to intervene, but Roland was already galloping towards Valerius, his eyes burning with an infernal light. The joust was brutal. Roland's lance, true to his word, splintered against Valerius's shield with a deafening crack, sending the Baron reeling from his saddle. But Valerius, though unseated, was not broken. The formal joust was over, but Roland's vow had just begun. From that day forward, Sir Roland abandoned all other duties, all other aspirations. He left the court, leaving a heartbroken Isolde behind, for he knew his path would be one of relentless pursuit. He gathered a small band of loyal men, equally outraged by Valerius's insolence, and began his relentless hunt. Valerius, fearing Roland's wrath, fled the kingdom, seeking refuge in distant lands among powerful allies. But Roland followed a shadow of retribution. He rode through harsh deserts, scaled treacherous mountains, braved stormy seas. He fought skirmish after skirmish, always asking for Valerius, always leaving a trail of destruction in his wake. The chase became legendary. Tales spread of Roland's unwavering pursuit, of his grim determination. He was no longer the shining knight of the joust, but a hardened warrior, grim-faced and relentless. Driven by a single, all-consuming purpose, he faced betrayals, ambushes, and countless dangers. He lost men, suffered wounds, but he never faltered. He learned of Valerius's alliances, his strategies, his weaknesses, and he exploited them with ruthless efficiency. His quest for vengeance became his entire existence. Years passed. Isolde, waiting anxiously, received only scarce, grim tidings of Roland's relentless hunt. She knew his vow, knew it would consume him until its grim fulfillment. Her heart ached for the man she loved, a man transformed by an act of cruelty into an instrument of retribution. She prayed for his return, but also for his peace, knowing that vengeance, once awakened, could be a dark master. Finally, after 5 grueling years, Roland cornered Valerius in a remote, forgotten fortress. Deep within a mountain range, the final confrontation was swift and brutal. Roland, his body scarred, his spirit tempered by years of relentless pursuit, faced Valerius. Valerius, pale and gaunt from years of running, fought with the desperation of a cornered beast. Clash of swords echoed through the desolate halls, a symphony of vengeance. Roland, fueled by the lingering memory of Isolde's tear, struck the final blow. Valerius fell, his life extinguished, his honor utterly shattered. Roland stood over him, his breath ragged, his sword dripping, his vow finally fulfilled. But as he looked down at his defeated enemy, there was no joy, no sense of triumph, only a profound emptiness. The vengeance he had so relentlessly pursued had consumed him. The man he once was, the joyful knight, the loving betrothed, had been lost somewhere along the relentless path of retribution. He was a weapon honed to a single purpose. He had fulfilled his vow, yes, but at the cost of his own soul. Roland returned to his kingdom a celebrated hero, but he was a stranger to himself. He sought out Isolde, hoping that her presence, her love, might heal the gaping wound in his soul. But when he saw her, now older, her face etched with years of worry, he saw not the joyous maiden he had left behind, but a woman whose spirit had been broken by absence and anxiety. He had avenged her honor, but he had lost his own peace and the vibrancy of their love. He had won the war, but lost himself. He had shattered Valerius, but in doing so he had shattered his own future and the possibility of happiness with the woman he had vowed to protect. His vow, born of righteous fury, had led to a tragic, hollow victory, leaving him with an unkaelic void where his heart once soared. Number 2. The Vow of the Silent Tower. In the heart of the bustling city of Viridian, where the clamor of markets and the laughter of children usually filled the air, a profound and oppressive silence had descended upon the royal court. Princess Adelina, beloved daughter of King Theron, stood accused of a terrible crime: sorcery. A series of unexplained misfortunes had plagued the kingdom, and a zealous faction within the court, led by the cunning and ambitious Grand Inquisitor, had pointed fingers at the innocent Adelina, whose gentle nature and interest in ancient texts were twisted into proof of dark arts. Despite her pleas, despite her father's desperate attempts to prove her innocence, the evidence, however fabricated, was mounting, fueled by fear and superstition. Sir Julian, a knight known for his unwavering integrity and his quiet, steadfast devotion to Princess Adelina, watched the proceedings with a growing sense of dread. He had served Adelina as her personal guard for years, observing her kindness, her love for her people, her quiet wisdom. He knew with absolute certainty that she was innocent. The accusations were a malicious ploy, designed to undermine the king and seize power. But who would believe him a mere knight against the powerful forces of the Inquisitor? As the day of Adelina's trial approached, the pressure became unbearable. King Theron, heartbroken and desperate, confessed to Julian that he feared for his daughter's life. The populace, inflamed by the Inquisitor's rhetoric, was turning against her. There seemed to be no way to prove her innocence in time. One night, Julian, his heart heavy with despair, sought out Adelina in the dungeon tower where she was held. Her face was pale, but her eyes, though filled with sorrow, still held a flicker of hope. "Sir Julian," she whispered, her voice fragile, "I know you believe in my innocence. But the darkness grows. If the worst should happen, if I am condemned, I only ask one thing: prove my innocence. Find the truth, no matter the cost. Let my name be cleared." He knew the Inquisitor sought to silence him, to remove anyone who might defend her. A desperate, terrible idea formed in his mind. A vow that would consume his life but might, just might, give her a chance. "My silence will be my protest, my endurance, my testament. I will not break this vow no matter how many years pass. Let my vow be a silent prayer, a persistent witness to your truth." Adelina stared at him, tears welling in her eyes, understanding the immense sacrifice he was proposing. It was a vow of self-imprisonment, of self-imposed solitude, a life lived in silent agony, but a desperate, final stand. Julian, true to his word, presented himself to King Theron the next morning. He explained his vow, his face grim, his resolve unshakable. King, seeing the depth of his loyalty and understanding the desperate hope it offered, granted his request. Julian was escorted to the highest tower, its chambers bleak and isolated, its windows overlooking the sprawling city. The door was locked behind him and the silence began. Julian's days were a monotonous cycle of silent contemplation, of walking the small confines of his chamber, of watching the city below, ever hopeful for a sign. He spoke no words, not to the servants who brought him his meager meals, not to the occasional guards who checked on him. He existed in a profound, unyielding silence, his only company, his thoughts, and the gnawing ache of his vow. He believed that his persistent public silence would keep the issue alive, a constant, unspoken question hanging over the kingdom, a testament to Adelina's innocence that could not be easily ignored. Trial of Princess Adelina proceeded, and without Julian's direct intervention, and with the populace swayed by the Inquisitor, she was indeed condemned. But King Theron, heartbroken yet clinging to Julian's desperate hope, refused to execute her. Instead, he ordered her imprisonment in a distant, isolated convent, a place of silent, solitary confinement, a living death, but at least life. The Inquisitor, though displeased, had achieved his main goal of removing her from power. Years turned into decades. Julian remained in his silent tower, a forgotten figure to many, a living legend to a few. His hair turned white, his body frail, his eyes deeply etched with the passage of time and the weight of his unyielding silence. He watched generations pass below him, the city changing, the political landscape shifting. He saw the Inquisitor rise to greater power, then slowly lose his influence as new factions emerged. He saw King Theron grow old and pass, replaced by a new monarch, Adelina's distant cousin, who, though more pragmatic, was not entirely unsympathetic to the old rumors of injustice. Julian's silent vigil became a symbol. People would point to the tower whispering of the knight who had vowed never to speak until the princess was cleared. His silence was a perpetual accusation, a haunting question that lingered in the collective memory of the kingdom. It kept the injustice alive, a quiet, insistent murmur in the heart of the city. As the political tides turned, as the old fears and superstitions faded, and as the memory of the Inquisitor's manipulation became clearer, new scholars, new thinkers began to question the old condemnation. Finally, after 30 long years, a young, earnest scholar, inspired by the legend of the Silent Knight and armed with newly discovered documents from the Inquisitor's discarded archives, presented compelling evidence to the new king. The documents revealed the Inquisitor's elaborate plot, his fabrication of evidence, his ruthless ambition. The truth of Adelina's innocence, long buried, finally came to light. The king, shocked by the revelation, immediately ordered her release from the convent. Princess Adelina, now an old woman, frail but with dignity still intact, was finally cleared of all charges. Her name was publicly restored, and the kingdom mourned the terrible injustice. The first thing Princess Adelina requested was to see Sir Julian. She was brought to the silent tower, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The old, gaunt knight sat by the window, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon. Adelina approached him, her voice trembling. "Sir Julian," she whispered, her voice filled with profound gratitude. "My name is cleared. The truth has been revealed. Your vow, it is fulfilled." Julian turned his head slowly, his eyes, though dim, still holding that same unwavering loyalty. He looked at her, truly looked at her, his gaze conveying decades of unspoken love, of silent suffering, of unwavering hope. He slowly raised his hand, reaching towards her, his fingers brushing her cheek. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips. He tried to speak, to utter the words that had been locked away for so long, but his voice, unused for decades, was gone. No sound emerged, only a soft, ragged breath. He had kept his vow of silence, truly and utterly. With a final, deep sigh, Sir Julian slumped forward, his last breath leaving his body. He died, having fulfilled his vow. His beloved princess cleared his name, etched into history as the Silent Knight. But his vow, born of love and desperation, had condemned him to a lifetime of silent, agonizing separation, a life lived in a self-imposed prison, waiting for a truth that came only when his own life was at its very end. His love had waited, his promise had endured, but his final moment was one of silent fulfillment, a tragic end to a lifetime of unwavering, voiceless devotion. Number 1. The Vow of the Obsidian Rose. In the ancient, mist-shrouded kingdom of Eldoria, a land steeped in legend and shadowed by forgotten forests, Princess Isolde lay dying. Her malady was swift and merciless, a strange, wasting sickness that defied the remedies of the kingdom's most skilled healers. She was young, barely 18, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of the deepest sea. Her impending loss cast a pall of despair over the entire kingdom, and her father, King Oberon, sat by her bedside, his face etched with unspeakable grief. Among the many knights who served King Oberon was Sir Kaelen, a knight of unwavering courage and a heart deeply secretly devoted to Princess Isolde. He had admired her from afar, a silent sentinel to her radiant beauty and her gentle spirit. He felt her pain as if it were his own, the thought of her passing a torment that gnawed at his soul. He had heard the whispers of an ancient legend, a tale spoken only in hushed tones. The obsidian rose. It was a flower of myth said to bloom only once in 1,000 years. In the heart of the perilous Shadowfen, a bog known for its ancient spirits, its treacherous quicksands, and its impenetrable darkness, legend claimed that a single petal of the obsidian rose, when consumed, could cure any ailment, restore any life, even at the brink of death. But no one had ever returned from the Shadowfen, and the very mention of its name struck fear into the bravest hearts. One desperate night, as Isolde's breathing grew fainter, Kaelen knelt before King Oberon, his face grim, his resolve absolute. I will bring it to her, or I will perish in the attempt, leaving my bones to bleach in the darkness of the fen. This is my vow, King Oberon, my absolute, unwavering promise to save your daughter, or die in the attempt. King Oberon, seeing the fierce, unyielding determination in Kaelen's eyes, and with no other hope remaining, granted his desperate plea. Kaelen prepared with haste, taking only his trusty sword, a small lantern, and a few meager provisions. His farewell to Isolde was silent, a long, lingering gaze at her pale, still form, a silent prayer for her endurance and a firm resolve in his heart. He set off under the cloak of night, his heart filled with a terrible hope and a daunting purpose. The journey to the Shadowfen was arduous, the path overgrown and choked by twisted trees. He entered the bog, and immediately an oppressive darkness enveloped him, a chilling mist that clung to everything. The air grew heavy, damp, and still. The ground beneath his feet was treacherous, shifting and sucking at his boots. He heard strange guttural sounds, the rustling of unseen creatures, the eerie whispers of ancient, restless spirits. The bog seemed alive, twisting and turning, disorienting him at every step. Pushed deeper, his lantern's feeble light barely piercing the oppressive gloom. He fell into hidden sinkholes, barely escaping with his life, pulled himself free from clinging, suffocating vines, and navigated through mazes of gnarled, skeletal trees. He felt unseen hands tugging at his cloak, soft, mournful wails echoing just beyond his hearing. The spirits of the Shadowfen seemed to resent his intrusion, their presence a cold, palpable weight on his soul. Kaelen pressed on his vow, a burning fire in the icy darkness, the image of Isolde's fading smile, a constant spur days blurred into a timeless nightmare. He was starving, exhausted, his body bruised and battered, his spirit tested to its very limits. He lost track of time, his senses dulled by the relentless gloom. Just as despair threatened to consume him, he saw it. In the deepest, darkest heart of the Shadowfen, surrounded by a faint, shimmering aura, bloomed the obsidian rose. It was a flower of impossible beauty, its petals the color of polished obsidian, dark and glistening, yet radiating an inner light. Pulsed with a subtle, vibrant energy, a silent promise of life. Kaelen stumbled towards it, his hands outstretched, his heart pounding. But as he reached for it, the ground beneath his feet gave way. Plunged into a quicksand pit, the thick, cold mud rapidly pulling him down. He struggled, his sword useless, his strength failing. The spirits of the fen seemed to laugh, their whispers growing louder, triumphant. He was sinking, his vow about to be broken, his mission a failure. In a last, desperate surge of will, fueled by his dying hope for Isolde, Kaelen looked at the rose. He knew with a sudden, chilling certainty that he could not pull himself free, but he could still fulfill his vow. With one final, agonizing effort, he stretched his arm, his fingers brushing against the rose's stem. He snapped off a single delicate petal, his fingers closing around it just as the quicksand swallowed him whole. His vow was to bring the rose or perish. He had done both. Days later, a royal search party sent by King Oberon in a final desperate attempt to find Kaelen stumbled upon the edge of the Shadowfen. They saw no trace of the knight, only the treacherous, silent bog. But there, on the bank, lying on a patch of moss, they found it. A single dark, glistening petal of the obsidian rose, still radiating its faint ethereal light, clutched in a gauntleted hand that barely protruded from the quicksand. The hand was still cold, but its grip on the petal was unwavering. Kaelen had perished, but he had fulfilled his vow. The petal was swiftly brought back to King Oberon, who immediately administered it to the dying Princess Isolde. As the dark petal touched her lips, a radiant golden light enveloped her, and the strange, wasting sickness receded, leaving her vibrant and whole again. Isolde awoke, restored to full health, unaware of the grim sacrifice that had bought her life. Kingdom rejoiced, celebrating the miraculous recovery of their princess, but the cost was known only to a few. Sir Kaelen, the knight who had dared to challenge death itself for love, was gone, his final act a testament to a vow that transcended life and death. His name was whispered in sorrow, a hero whose love had saved his princess but consumed himself in the process. The obsidian rose had brought life, but it had demanded a life in return, a silent, tragic exchange for a knight's ultimate, undying vow.